My name is Isabella Martinez, and I never imagined that my journey would begin with the sound of my father's voice echoing through a cramped office, delivering words that would shatter everything I thought I knew about family, fairness, and my place in the world. "I'm handing the family restaurant over to your brother," my father announced, his voice carrying that unmistakable tone of patriarchal authority that brooked no argument. After all, he has a family to support. In that moment, I felt something inside me crumble completely. It wasn't the sharp, piercing pain of breaking glass, but rather the quiet disintegration of 28 years of trust and expectations, like weathered stone silently crumbling into dust in the wind. I stared at my father, and he stared back at me. There was a flicker of evasion in his eyes, but mostly there was that sense of inevitability, as if this decision were the most natural thing in the world, as if all the sweat I had poured out in that kitchen over the years, all the late nights I had endured at culinary school, all the effort it had taken to climb from dishwasher to operations manager meant absolutely nothing. Because I was a daughter and Marcus was a son. Because Marcus had a wife and 2 children who needed support. Because in this family's traditional mindset, the word inheritance was naturally tied to gender. I smiled, not the bitter smile of heartbreak, but a standard, professional, polite yet distant smile. I slowly rose from my chair, my high heels clicking out a crisp, determined rhythm on the floor as I walked straight toward the door. "Isabella, you understand my difficult position, don't you?" My father's voice called from behind me, carrying that tone of someone expecting forgiveness. I stopped without turning around and said softly, "I understand completely, Dad. You made the decision you thought was right." Then I pushed open the door and walked out. No slamming, no arguments, not even a trace of anger, because I knew that in that moment, any emotional display would only be interpreted as "girls are just too irrational" or "this is exactly why women can't handle business." 2 months later, I found myself sitting in the operations manager's office at Obsidian, a high-end restaurant chain in Midtown Manhattan, reviewing the quarterly financial reports. The numbers were beautiful. Revenue was up 32% from the same period last year. Employee satisfaction had reached 91%, and customer retention was holding steady at 78%. This was my world, a world built on professional competence and management talent. Here, no one questioned my decisions because of my gender, and no one thought I was less deserving of this job because I didn't have children to feed. My phone buzzed, and Dad flashed across the screen. I glanced at the time, 2:17 in the afternoon. This wasn't when he usually called. "Hello, Dad," I answered, my voice calm and distant. What came through the phone was a panicked voice I had never heard before. "Isabella, please help your brother. He's in serious trouble." I leaned back in my ergonomic chair, looking out through the floor-to-ceiling windows at Manhattan's busy streets, my tone remaining calm. "What happened?" The restaurant is about to close." My father's voice trembled. "Our Yelp rating has dropped to 1 star. The health department gave us a final warning, and if we don't pass tomorrow's reinspection, they're going to revoke our operating license. Marcus, he's falling apart. Isabella, you have to save us." I was silent for several seconds, then spoke slowly. "Oh, really? And why exactly should I help him?" This question hung like a heavy blow in the silence between us. "Isabella." My father's voice became hoarse, filled with a pleading I had never heard before. "This is Grandma's kitchen. It's your grandmother Rose's life's work, our family's 40 years of history. You grew up watching it flourish. You know what it means to us. Now it's about to disappear." The mention of Grandma Rose made my heart contract sharply. Rose was the eternal lighthouse in my heart. She taught me my first recipe, Southern fried chicken with honey butter biscuits. She told me that true cooking wasn't simply about heating food, but about infusing love and memories into every bite. Before she passed away, she held my hand and said, "Isabella, you have this gift. Don't let anyone tell you that you don't belong at the center of the kitchen." "What has Marcus done to the restaurant?" I asked, the ice in my voice thawing slightly. He thought if he switched everything to frozen and pre-made items, he could cut costs and increase efficiency. But my father's voice grew even more desperate. All our regular customers left, half the staff quit, and our suppliers cut off our credit. "Isabella, I know I wronged you, but you're the only one who can save this restaurant now." I looked at the photo on my desk from last year's restaurant industry conference, where I had been named Operations Manager of the Year. In the picture, I looked confident and professional, wearing a well-tailored suit and holding the award. That version of me no longer needed my father's approval. But Grandma's restaurant? "I'll stop by this afternoon to assess the situation," I said, then hung up. When I parked in front of that familiar red brick building, my emotions were a complex mix. This place held my most beautiful childhood memories and had witnessed my transformation from a girl who knew nothing about cooking into a professional chef. But now, 2 letters in the neon sign were broken, turning Grandma's Kitchen into Grandma's Kit N, looking both ridiculous and pitiful, like a toothless old man trying to smile. The moment I pushed through the door, a mixture of stale grease and cheap industrial cleaner hit me. This was definitely not the place I remembered, which had been filled with the aroma of freshly baked biscuits, slow-simmered gravies, and freshly ground black pepper. It was peak lunch hour, but the restaurant had only 3 sparse tables of customers. One table held what looked like tourists, a young couple frowning at the food on their plates. Another table seated 2 elderly people who had probably come out of habit or nostalgia, but whose expressions showed they were regretting the decision. The last table held a tired-looking office worker who was absent-mindedly poking at something with his fork. "If you're looking for the manager, he's in the kitchen crying." The speaker was Maria Gonzalez, a senior server here. She was 58 years old and had worked here for 15 years. When she saw me, her eyes immediately turned red, and she was carrying a plate with what appeared to be a lifeless meatloaf next to obviously frozen French fries. "Maria, what is this?" I pointed at the meatloaf, struggling to control the shock in my voice. "Frozen and reheated, honey." Maria shook her head helplessly, shame in her eyes. "Marcus said it would cut food costs by 30% and improve service efficiency. Those handmade meatloaves we used to make, he said they were too inefficient." "What about the other dishes?" "The tomato basil sauce is now from a jar bought wholesale from Costco. The hand-rolled pasta was replaced with dried noodles. Even the cornbread is made from pre-mixed powder, not Rose's original recipe." Maria's voice choked up as she spoke. "Isabella, this isn't the place you remember anymore." I took a deep breath, trying to suppress the anger and heartbreak churning in my chest. "I'm going to check the kitchen." The kitchen was in worse condition than I had imagined. The floor was greasy, making a sticky pop-pop sound with every step. Dishes were piled mountain high in the sink, giving off a sour smell. The work surfaces were covered with stains and clearly hadn't been thoroughly cleaned in a long time. The range hood was dripping yellow grease, and there were obvious signs of pest problems in the corners. This had once been Grandma's kingdom, where every corner sparkled and every tool was perfectly organized. She used to say, "The kitchen is a sacred place that must be treated with reverence." And now, my brother Marcus was sitting on an overturned milk crate in the corner, his head in his hands, surrounded by torn-up schedules and a pile of unopened bills. He was 30 years old, a decent car salesman who was kind and good to his wife and two children. But his understanding of the restaurant business probably stopped at heat up food and sell it. Bella? He looked up, his eyes unfocused and his face pale, like a sailor about to sink in a storm who had spotted a rescue boat. God, you really came. You have to save me, sis. I really screwed up. I surveyed the kitchen, my gaze settling on a large pot bubbling on the stove. That should have been Grandma's pride and joy, her secret tomato basil sauce recipe that had once been called the soul of Southern restaurants by Food and Wine magazine. I walked over and ladled out a spoonful to taste. Canned sauce? I turned to look at Marcus, my voice cold as an icebox. You're using industrial canned tomato sauce from Costco in Grandma's restaurant? Fresh tomatoes are too expensive. Marcus jumped up to defend himself, his voice carrying a tone of desperate justification. And they take too much time and labor to process. Isabella, you need to understand the importance of cost control. I have 2 kids to feed and a mortgage to pay. I can't just think about ideals like you can. Cost control? I laughed coldly, casually dumping that spoonful of industrial sauce into the garbage. You saved $2 per jar and drove away all the loyal customers who sustained this restaurant for 40 years. Is this the business wisdom you learned from business school case studies? Those old customers were just stuck in nostalgia. Modern dining is about efficiency and standardization. Marcus's face turned bright red. And I'm the owner here now. Dad gave me the restaurant. I have the right to decide how to run it. Then please explain, Mr. Owner. I picked up an invoice from the table. Why this week's revenue can't even cover the electricity bill? Why has our Yelp rating dropped from 4.3 stars to 1.2? Why did head chef Tony quit saying he didn't want to ruin his professional reputation? Marcus deflated like a punctured balloon. He slumped back onto the milk crate, covering his face with his hands. I don't know. I thought I was doing the right thing. Business school professors said the key to the restaurant business was controlling food costs and increasing table turnover. I did what they taught, but you forgot the most important thing. My voice softened slightly but remained firm. You treated the restaurant like a factory and customers like consumption data. You don't understand that people don't come here just to fill their stomachs. That's McDonald's job. People come to Grandma's kitchen to recapture memories, to feel that sense of being cared for and embraced. When you severed that emotional connection, you severed the restaurant's lifeline. Just then, the kitchen door opened. My father walked in, followed by an Asian man in a tailored black suit wearing gold-rimmed glasses. The man looked to be around 40. Elegant in manner, but with sharp eyes, clearly a seasoned professional in the business world. Isabella, don't be so hard on your brother, my father said, habitually protective, then turned to the man behind him. This is David Chen, a senior restaurant consultant. I paid a lot to get him to help save this restaurant. David Chen? I had seen that name in Restaurant Business magazine. He specialized in handling kitchen nightmares, level disasters, charged extremely high fees, but had a high success rate. His methods were known to be tough, and the industry called him the restaurant emergency room. David surveyed the kitchen, his gaze lingering for several seconds on the frozen meatloaf packaging, then looking at the bubbling tomato sauce, and finally settling on me with a slight, mocking smile. This is the legendary Grandma's Kitchen with 40 years of history that was once recommended by Bon Appetit magazine as one of America's 10 must-visit Southern restaurants. His voice was calm and cool, but each word was as precise as a scalpel. Honestly, this place now looks more like a college cafeteria after a chemical accident. His sharp tongue precisely stung everyone present. Marcus's face grew even more uncomfortable, and my father coughed awkwardly. You're Isabella Martinez? David turned to me, extending his hand, his tone becoming serious and respectful. I've studied your operational case at Obsidian Group. Transforming a nearly bankrupt restaurant chain into an industry benchmark in less than 2 years is impressive. Honestly, I don't understand why the actual controller of this restaurant isn't you, but rather— He glanced at Marcus and paused. This automotive sales expert. Marcus's face turned the color of liver, looking both angry and ashamed. My father cleared his throat, appearing uncomfortable. Mr. Chen, we're here to solve problems, not to argue. The first step in solving problems is honestly facing who created them, I said, crossing my arms and looking directly at my father, my voice calm but full of power. I can help save this restaurant, but I have 2 conditions. Name them. I'll agree to anything if it can save the restaurant, my father said urgently, his eyes filled with desperate hope. First, during the renovation period, I have absolute management authority over this restaurant. Marcus either follows my orders or goes home to watch his kids. No negotiation. My voice wasn't loud, but every word was clear and filled with unquestionable authority. Second, Mr. Chen's consulting fees come out of Marcus's future restaurant dividends, not from the restaurant's operating funds. Marcus started to protest. Deal! My father interrupted him without hesitation. The next 72 hours were hellish torture and rebirth. Throw it out, that too. Everything goes. I stood at the walk-in cooler door, directing 2 workers I had temporarily hired to remove boxes of frozen meatloaf, instant mashed potato powder, canned sauces, and various pre-made products. Marcus watched these cost control products he had paid for being treated like garbage, trembling with distress. That's all money. His voice shook. Just those frozen meatloaves cost me $800. That was garbage, I replied coldly, without any sympathy. And poison that destroyed Grandma's reputation and this restaurant's brand value. Marcus, you need to understand one principle. In the restaurant business, cheap ingredients are never cost savings. They're the most expensive wrong investment. David Chen leaned against the doorframe, recording something on his iPad and occasionally letting out appreciative chuckles. Now this is what a real chef looks like. According to my preliminary calculations, returning to fresh ingredients will increase direct costs by about 40%. But if we can win back lost customers, the average ticket price could increase by at least 60%, and table turnover could improve from the current 0.8 to 2.1. It's simple mathematics, Marcus. But how do we win back those customers? Marcus asked dejectedly, his voice filled with despair. The bad reviews on Yelp are overwhelming. Yesterday, a customer posted on Facebook that our fried chicken tastes like cardboard. Because you betrayed the community's trust. I stopped what I was doing and turned to face my brother directly. Marcus, do you know the Gable couple? That elderly pair who came here for dinner every Friday for 25 years? Do you know why they came? Not because they were hungry, but because the tomato basil sauce here reminded Mrs. Gable of her late mother's cooking. Do you know the Johnson family? 3 generations celebrated birthdays here because Grandma Rose's red velvet cake was their family tradition. When you replaced these memory carriers with industrial products, you essentially told the entire community that their stories, their emotions, their loyalty weren't worth the few dollars you saved in cost differences. That afternoon, I called a meeting with all the remaining staff. The restaurant now only had 3 servers, 1 dishwasher, and 1 part-time sous chef. The original 12-person team had mostly quit over the past 2 months. I know you've been having a hard time. I looked at these tired and dejected faces. Your wages were cut by 20%, working conditions deteriorated, and you had to apologize to customers for poor quality food you didn't even make. Starting today, Everyone returns to standard wages, and overtime is paid at 1.5 times the hourly rate. But my standards are also high. All dishes must be prepared strictly according to Grandma Rose's handwritten recipes. If even one onion isn't cut to standard, we start over. Anyone who thinks they can't do it can leave now, and I won't hold any grudges. Nobody moved. Maria even quietly wiped away tears. Good. Now, we need to prepare for tomorrow morning's health department inspection. It was an all-nighter that changed everything. David, Marcus, and I, 4 people total, knelt on the kitchen floor scrubbing decades-old grease from tile crevices with steel wool brushes. We dismantled every piece of equipment for deep cleaning, repainted the walls, and replaced all damaged utensils. At 3 in the morning, everyone was exhausted and collapsed in chairs. David handed me a cup of instant coffee, the only drinkable thing currently available in the restaurant. "Why don't you open your own restaurant?" David suddenly asked, his gaze becoming serious and sharp. "With your technical skills and management ability, you could easily support a Michelin-starred restaurant. Why waste your talent seeking family approval?" I glanced at Marcus, who was fast asleep with his head on the table, then looked at Grandma's photo hanging on the wall. In that photo, Rose wore an apron with a kind smile, standing in front of the kitchen kingdom she had built. "Because in this family, inheritance rights have gender attributes," I said quietly, my voice carrying a calm bitterness. "I spent 10 years studying culinary arts, earned my degree, and worked my way from dishwasher to operations manager in top restaurants. But Marcus only needs to have a Y chromosome and need to support a family to automatically get all of this. I don't want their restaurant, David. I want to prove how wrong their judgment was." David was silent for a while, then gently clinked his coffee cup against mine. "Then this crisis is your best stage to prove yourself." The health department inspection passed without incident, and we received an A rating. But the real challenge was Friday evening's reopening. We posted a simple announcement in the community Facebook groups, on Nextdoor, and in the local newspaper. "Isabella is back. Grandma Rose's flavors are back." Friday evening, Grandma's kitchen reopens with all dishes made according to traditional recipes. These simple sentences, like stones thrown into a calm lake, created ripples throughout the community. At exactly 5 o'clock Friday evening, the first customers pushed through the door. It was Mr. and Mrs. Gable, the elderly couple who had dined here for 30 years. Mrs. Gable saw me standing at the open kitchen pass and immediately broke into a long-awaited smile. "Isabella, dear, we heard we don't have to endure that rubber-like fake chicken anymore? Tonight's special is Secret Recipe's Southern Fried Chicken with handmade honey butter biscuits and slow-braised collard greens that simmered for 8 hours, I replied with a smile. "Just like Grandma Rose used to make, with no compromises in any step." As night fell, the restaurant gradually filled with people. Most of these faces were familiar, all former regulars now returning with tentative hope. The battle in the kitchen officially began. "2 meatloaves, 1 medium, 1 well done. Cornbread up for table 3. Table 5 needs an extra soup." I called out orders while skillfully operating 3 stovetops, the flames illuminating my focused face. Marcus was assigned to the prep station, responsible for cutting vegetables and plating. Initially, he was frantic, mistaking parsley for cilantro and cutting onions unevenly. But under my strict guidance and David's calm coordination, he gradually found his rhythm. "Marcus, that's cilantro, not parsley. Do you want to ruin this soup?" I shouted without turning around. "Sorry, I'll redo it right away," Marcus responded without any argument, sweating profusely as he started over. This was the first time I had seen him so focused on his work, instead of constantly calculating costs. The crisis hit at 7:30 in the evening. The commercial dishwasher suddenly broke down, dishes began piling up like mountains, and the front of house faced the embarrassing situation of having no plates to use. "I'll wash dishes." An unexpected voice rang out. My father suddenly appeared at the back kitchen door. He had already removed his suit jacket and rolled up his shirt sleeves, revealing his graying arms. This man, who had once been high and mighty, accustomed to giving orders, now quietly walked to the sink and bent over the hot, soapy water to begin washing dishes. Watching his focused but slightly clumsy movements, a small corner of the ice in my heart seemed to melt. "David, help Maria seat guests in the front. She can't handle it alone." I continued directing the battle. "Yes, chef." David gave me a mocking salute, then turned toward the front of house. That night, we successfully served dinner to 215 customers. Every dish was hot. Every dish carried sincerity and craftsmanship. When the last satisfied customer left, the entire kitchen erupted in long, absent cheers. Marcus collapsed on the floor, too tired to lift even his fingers, but his facial expression was something I had never seen before, the pure joy of achievement earned through honest labor. "Sis!" he panted, his voice weak but sincere. "That fried chicken. I snuck a piece. It was really so delicious. I was a complete fool before, wasn't I?" I handed him a bottle of ice water. "Yes, you were quite stupid, but tonight, you were at least a competent prep cook." 3 months later, on a sunny afternoon, Grandma's kitchen had not only risen from the dead, but was more popular than ever. Our Yelp rating had climbed back to 4.6 stars, and a New York Times food critic had written a column about us titled "The Perfect Fusion of Tradition and Innovation." David's consulting work had long since ended, but he still visited regularly, ostensibly for follow-up monitoring, but really to eat my newly improved red velvet cake. My father called Marcus and me to his office. He looked somewhat older than a few months ago, but his mental state was obviously much better, and his eyes held something I had never seen before: respect. "Isabella." My father took out a legal document, his eyes filled with guilt and cautious hope. "I've been watching these past few months. You were right. Marcus really doesn't have the ability to manage the restaurant alone. I've had the lawyer redraft the ownership agreement. 49% of the restaurant goes to you. Come back as general manager with full authority over all operational decisions. Marcus can keep 26% ownership, but he'll mainly handle external partnerships and marketing." Marcus sat beside him, nodding sincerely. "Sis, I have no objections. These past few months, I've learned more working with you than I had in the previous 5 years. But honestly, I don't have your talent or passion. If you're willing to come back, I'd be happy to be your deputy." This was belated recognition, the justice I had once dreamed of. However, looking at that beautifully prepared legal document, I didn't reach out to take it. "Thank you," I said quietly, my voice calm and firm. "So when will you officially return to work?" my father asked expectantly. "Quit the obsidian job. That's just working for someone else anyway. This is family property, the business you should inherit." "I'm not coming back." These 6 words plunged the office into deathly silence again. "What?" My father was stunned, as if he had heard the most incredible thing in the world. "But didn't you do all this to regain control of the restaurant?" "No." I stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the street below full of life. "I did this to prove I was the best, but I don't need to prove my worth by inheriting your approval." I turned around and took an elegant brochure from my bag, placing it on the table. It was printed with beautiful typography. Isabella's Culinary Academy, with the subtitle, "Preserving Tradition, Creating the Future." "Next month, my cooking school opens in downtown. I said with a smile, my voice carrying undisguised pride and anticipation. It specializes in teaching traditional American cuisine preparation techniques and modern restaurant management concepts. I already have sufficient investment. David is my business partner, and we've hired 3 Michelin-starred chefs as guest instructors. But, my father looked at a loss. This is the legacy your grandmother left, the place where you grew up. Marcus now understands basic restaurant operations principles, and more importantly, he's learned to respect tradition and quality. I interrupted my father. And I've already hired an excellent professional manager for you, Sarah Thompson. She has 15 years of experience in chain restaurant management. She starts officially on Monday. Marcus can continue handling what he's really good at: negotiating with suppliers, maintaining community relations, and managing external partnerships. But kitchen decision-making authority belongs to professionals. I walked over to Marcus and gently patted his shoulder. You're a good brother, Marcus, and a good father. But this isn't just about restaurant management. It's about everyone finding their truly suitable place. You don't need to force yourself to become grandma's heir. You just need to be the best version of yourself. Marcus looked at me, his eyes moist. He stood up and gave me an awkward but heartfelt hug. Thank you, sis. Thank you for helping me understand all this. I was always trying to become someone I wasn't, and I nearly destroyed what we all cherished. I finally looked at my father. He seemed to have aged considerably, but also appeared much more at peace, with a complex emotion in his eyes: guilt, admiration, pride, and a father's renewed understanding of his daughter. I'm proud of you, Isabella. My father's voice trembled slightly. Not just because you could save this restaurant, but because you're wiser and more courageous than I am. You know when to fight and when to turn away gracefully. Walking out of the restaurant, the afternoon sunlight was perfect. Golden light filtered through the sycamore leaves onto the sidewalk, and the air carried the aroma of fresh baked goods from a nearby bakery. David was leaning against his Tesla waiting for me, holding 2 lattes from a nearby coffee shop. Everything settled? He asked, handing me the coffee. No, I accepted the warm cup, looking at the culinary school building in the distance that was under intense renovation, feeling an unprecedented surge of excitement and anticipation. Not an ending, but a real beginning. I was no longer the girl waiting for her father to distribute inheritance, nor the sister who had to quietly step aside because her brother needed to support his family. I was Isabella Martinez, a professional chef, an educator, a fully independent woman in complete control of her own destiny. Behind me, Grandma's kitchen filled with familiar laughter and conversation, beginning their new chapter. But my path lay ahead, broad, free, and full of infinite possibilities. A year later, at the first graduation ceremony of Isabella's Culinary Academy, Marcus sat in the front row of the audience, holding his 3-year-old daughter Rosie, named after our grandmother, applauding enthusiastically. My father sat next to him, boasting to strangers nearby. See, that principal on stage is my daughter. Pretty impressive, right? That's her brother next to him. He's running the family restaurant quite well now, too, though, of course, thanks to his sister's guidance. I stood at the podium in the Academy's main auditorium, looking at 120 pairs of eyes filled with longing and dreams. Many of them were young women like I once was, who had come here with a love for cooking but faced various prejudices and limitations in the traditional restaurant industry. In this industry, I said into the microphone, my voice firm yet gentle, full of power, you will be questioned, overlooked, and told that your place should be in home kitchens rather than professional ones. Some will say women aren't strong enough to handle the pressure of commercial kitchens. Others will say, women are too emotional to make management decisions. Still, others will say women should focus their energy on family rather than pursuing professional achievement. But I want to tell you, pick up your knives, light your fires, and use your skills and persistence to counter all doubts. Your value is not defined by others, only by every dish you serve, every taste, experience you create, and every bit of warmth you bring to people. Thunderous applause erupted and continued for a long time. I smiled as I surveyed the audience below, as if I could see Grandma Rose nodding kindly in the crowd. She had once said, "Isabella, true strength isn't conquering others, it's becoming the best version of yourself." This was my answer. No compromise, no begging, no sacrificing self for recognition. Earn respect through ability, then turn gracefully to create your own world. In that world, gender is no longer a limitation, tradition is no longer a shackle, and everyone can shine because of their own talent and effort.